Hello, my darlings. This is going to be one from the Crypt, one from the mausoleum, as it were. Let me take this off. It's quite warm in here. So pull up a chair as we talk about the animation and reanimation of The Sims. I'd gotten out of college with a basic understanding of animation. I eventually ended up basically working at Electronic Arts, but in the tools group, software tools, testing animation software for people who were making games for the 3DO interactive multiplayer. And then I got laid off from that because they needed to cut a bunch of heads and roll them along. And so I ended up going and working for 3DO instead and doing animation and, zombie shooter kind of games. And then ended up working as a lead animator and then art director on a bunch of different projects. Because apparently I had a good eye. I got two actually, but I ended up coming back to Electronic Arts to work at Maxis because a headhunter said, hey, they're looking for a guy to do animation for these little people for a Will Wright game. And I said, oh, okay, that's cool. Right after the headhunter gave my resume over to folks at Electronic Arts / Maxis, a bunch of people who I knew at that place were saying, hey, Eric's available. So Eric got hired. This is after I'd worked on a couple things like a Disney contract where they were making an Aladdin game that would never see the light of day, but where I was building models of things like snakes and giant mud monster dudes and even the magic carpet. So it was very interesting to be working on that thing, which was a combination of the Aladdin TV show and the Aladdin Fly Around game that was popular at Disney Quest in different locations around places like Orlando, Florida, and Chicago. So I got hired in to help make these little people live. I was mostly working in a broom closet and was soon joined by a guy named Eric Chen, who has kept on with working on The Sims ever since. Our boss was Charles London, and we just started making little people. In my case, I started there and the little people were pooping and peeing on the ground, and we had to give them toilets and seats and counters to pick up the pizza so you could eat it and then leave garbage behind, and it just became this pooping, peeing, walking around kind of thing. And then we got a bunch of lovely women involved who had been designers on other interesting products, and they came in, Roxy and Claire and Connor the producer and Chris following up, batting cleanup, and the little guys starting to live. They started to thrive, and as we went on, I had to dig deep into cinema and pantomime from theater and other things in order to get the Sims to interact with each other. I would draw things out and tell a joke and do a punchline and get people to react to it, and which to some people was mystifying because they hadn't spent a lot of time watching those silent movies like some of us had to in animation school, but also would see more broad pantomime in things like Danny Kaye movies, where he was a living cartoon. That happened in other cinemas in other parts of the world, but for me it was someone like Danny Kaye, who you always knew where he was looking and you always knew what he was thinking. And people really loved it because it really talked to folks who had a background in European and, older American theater. So that was that. We did our work primarily in 3D Studio Max, a product called Character Studio, which let you have sort of a shortcut to making the 3D characters and making them live. It would let you lay down keys and time things out fairly well in a fairly simplified manner. It wasn't as extensive and professional as things like Autodesk Maya, because Maya definitely has a well-established graph editor that lets you chart out things in sinuous little paths to show how much something is rotating or how much something is translating. That would come later. During the expansion pack era, we had folks who were pretty decent riggers, and they made up these Maya rigs for folks, and they tested it out and made it work, and that was good. But in the meantime, we were making all sorts of fun animations with these little tiny computer people. In the first product, I think I did about 1,200 of these things. They're animations, so they were called skills because that's what the programmers were calling them. And these animations were very much rudimentary. We didn't have a lot of time to make things perfect, so we made them functional and good, which is a lesson for most people, that it has to be functional and it has to be decent before it's perfect. And that's usually not what folks who have specialized and spent their life, gushing over want to hear. It's just strange because I look back on that time, did a lot of work, spent a lot of late nights making things happen, but it never seemed like a sacrifice because we were going to make a lot of people happy, or hoped we were. When the game finally left the little space it was in where we thought we were going to get canceled every other week, it became a lot more fun because we were testing it out and people were really responding to it. And even though we couldn't do like the most beautiful, sort of well-timed movie kind of animation on it, we were still having people read the animations from the cheap seats. As we got farther along, there was some questioning about whether this was the right way, and a bunch of folks went to see a show in San Francisco called Full Moon, by a group called the New Vaudevillians. It was pretty much Bill Irwin and David Shiner, and they've been seen in other things since, but it's usually miming or broad pantomime, and that's what we were already using. But when you do it from the cheap seats, and even if you're looking at normal humans, you'll be able to tell the silhouettes of a different kind of hand position. You'll be able to tell a facial expression from ways away because we have thousands and thousands and thousands of years of development that say it's wise to be able to tell if there's an agitated person over there. So if they are sick or if they are homicidal, you can pick up a rock and hit them with it. Before they do something bad to you or steal away your people and your goods, and leave you hit on the head with a rock somewhere. So later on, we developed things where we were making it so that you could change the hand forms out to different ones, so it was easier to communicate and easier to make the individual little people seem more alive. But at the time, we had a paddle hand and we had no facial expression change. So, as a concession to the folks who really wanted to explore this broader pantomime, but still under the limitations we had, we ended up contracting with Mr. Shiner, went to Seattle, took a lot of video. Didn't come a lot didn't come out of it, except for a corroboration of we were going in the right direction. Because once you take away that thumb and the ability to change the hand, even from far off, it means that you can only give a gift by doing something broad and pantomimey, not that there's some magical formula that makes it so that anything else will occur. And unless you actually have tried to do miming or improv, sort of like physical acting, you just don't understand that. So we worked through the understanding problem, and then also through the like corroboration that we're doing the right thing problem, and just ran forward doing as many of these silly little things as possible. Like I said, like 1,200 or more by me, you know, I think a few hundred by Bob King, and maybe a few more by somebody else. I hit the microphone a few more times. How about that? And so at the end of the day, even though we didn't have the best tools and we didn't have the best amount of time to get this all done and make it perfect, we still had something to be proud of and something that made people care. Because that's what good content is about. Not that, you know, animation or content should be about just numbers of things, but it should always be about the story, the caring, the empathy, or some level of connection. So later on, we ended up making more and crazier stuff. I was able to work with Don Hopkins and people like Patrick Barrett and other folks to go from just the chairs to sofas to desks and tables to beds and showers, tubs, hot tubs, all sorts of different things. Basically all working from that same premise of getting to the place and having the character interact with an object or another character. In this case, technically there was a component called Vitaboy, which had that little skeleton inside of it, and you could put different skeletons in there and operate their animations, and then a thing called S-Animator, which made sure that they were facing in the right direction, made sure they were moving around and interacting with each other. And, you know, all these different components work together to make that system in The Sims where you're watching and you're caring. You're watching one, you know, the sim, you go over there and you're taking your sim and you say, okay, I want to kiss this other sim. You don't have the rapport, you get slapped. Or you get rebuffed with a hand in the face. So, and these great failure states make even better storytelling. And all this stuff is snowballed, and it's become a style, and it's become a different sense of how to communicate, but going back to an original thing where people were standing on stages in some sort of gaslight or in front of a campfire, or in a large space where the roof rolls back and you can use the California sunshine to make your silent film. Now, a lot of this success and this reading of these things happened because we had a revolution where people were getting even more home PC computers with more power in them, and we just happened to get bundled with the Christmas 2000 bundles, so more and more people were playing this game. Likewise, we had tons of people who wanted something to make them happy, and we were happy to oblige. So I hope this made some level of sense. The Sims 1, the original, had a lot of people working on it, and a lot of people working really hard. I was in the building a lot back then, and it was a lot of people making great contributions and making cool stuff happen. Later on I got to do even more, and so I'll make other videos about that, but the stories of people making something cool are always inspiring to me, so I thought I would pass some stuff on. So let me put this back on because I need to get back in my carriage and go back to the crematorium. The mortuary. So, bundle up, cuddle up with your loved ones. Don't go out if you don't have to. And I'll see you on another video.